Before we begin the panel and the introductions, we're going to show you a video that was made on the second anniversary of the deployment of the current UN mission in Somalia. The video is about 4 minutes long, so we're going to knock out the lights and show you the video, and then we're going to go up on the stage and I'll introduce the panel. So again, a warm welcome to everybody here.
There is a story of an emerging success here in Somalia. This is a country which was mired for decades in conflict, which now has more and better governance than ever before. A country where the rule of law is replacing the rule of the gun. A country where people who used to flee in their millions as refugees are now slowly starting to return. 2 years ago, we didn't have street lights down the street. We didn't have dual carriageway roads in Mogadishu. We didn't have a pizza delivery service. You didn't have a dry cleaners. You didn't have an ATM. You didn't have thousands of people on Lido Beach every Friday. I mean, this is a city that is transforming and coming back to life. Millions and millions of children have been vaccinated against polio, against measles. Livestock and agriculture has been hugely boosted. Just last year, 24 million animals were vaccinated and immunized through a food and agricultural organization project. The economy of Somalia depends upon livestock. And this year, I'm very pleased, they exported a record number, 5 million livestock were exported. Somalia has many friends in the world, and their efforts need to be brought together, and that's something the UN helps to do through the New Deal Somali Compact. Somalia has at least 70% of its population under the age of 30, so this is one of the youngest countries in the world. And the youth that I have met are full of energy, full of hope. They're very committed to education, and they're very brave. I attended the TEDx event at the Lido Beach, absolutely full of talented young Somalis with great ideas. Here as well, you can see women playing a much, much bigger part, and I think in the next year we'll see them playing a bigger role in the political life of the country. We're here to provide strategic advice to the federal government and its institutions as it undertakes a really ambitious political project, federating the country, revising the constitution, democratizing, and we'll continue to support that process. And it's a Somali-owned process, a Somali-led process, and we will respect that as we have done. When we need to, we'll support, and when we don't, we step back from the process as well. UNSOM has worked very, very closely with our partners in the African Union, AMISOM, and we have worked with them on stabilization, particularly after the success of AMISOM and Somali National Army in regaining territory and towns from Al-Shabaab. I pay tribute to all the colleagues in the United Nations system who are here. They've given up their families and their lives and jobs elsewhere, come to what is sometimes still a dangerous place, and we've sadly lost colleagues in these last 2 years. But they're determined to help the Somali people to achieve their dreams, which are now within reach.
Well, that was a wonderfully uplifting video, if I may say so, and very different from my own recollection of Mogadishu in 1993, 22 years ago, when I was there with UNITAF. So things, gentlemen, have certainly moved along with much tribute to both the United Nations and the African Union mission. So on behalf of my IPI colleagues here, I want to really welcome all of you to this briefing and discussion on Somalia The Road to 2016 with Nicholas Kay the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Somalia, and Ambassador Maman Sambo Sidiku, the Special Representative of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission for Somalia. And this is part of our series of meetings with Special Representatives of the Secretary General. But for the past several years, IPI has put a particular focus on Somalia and on the roles in particular of the UN and the African Union, both of whom continue to work with the federal government of Somalia in rebuilding this country, which is emerging, as you just heard, from nearly a quarter century of conflict, most of the time without a functioning national government. This is actually, and it's a real pleasure, the third time in the last year that you've been with us, Mr. Kay, on this platform to update us on progress achieved and challenges still ahead. And you are joined today by Ambassador Sidiku on behalf of the AU Commission, and we welcome both of you to this platform. Everybody here has their biographies documenting their extensive experience in front of you. I believe Ambassador Douale is going to be joining us, but he's not yet here at the moment. So on your last visit here, February 5, Mr. Kay, you described 2015 as the year of federalism and delivery, noting that, quote, this year will be decisive in terms of whether Somalis can achieve the ambitious goals they have set for themselves to federate their country and to democratize by September 2016. So it's going to be very useful for us today to get a better sense of the benchmarks that you have set to achieve these goals, and to the extent to which the Somali leadership and political representatives are on course to meet them within the time frame you and they have established together. This involves, above all, negotiating the terms of a new federal constitution on which the Somali people will be asked to vote next year, but much more is involved. I again want to note that 2016, 8 months from now, will be a quarter century since the fall of Siad Barre's government. And a large part of today's Somali population, as noted in the video, is under age 30 and was barely just born around that time or later on. So this is truly a new generation in Somalia that you both are relating to. The other major concern, of course, remains the security situation and the important role of the AMISOM, the African Union Mission in Somalia. So while Al-Shabaab does not control the main cities and it has been removed from Mogadishu, it remains in the field. So it's going to be really useful to have your joint assessment, if you can. At a UN conference last week, one researcher indicated to me that al-Shabaab continues to constitute a major threat in the countryside, perhaps even somewhat more than is reflected in recent reports to the Secretary General, and that AMISOM remains seriously challenged. So it'll be very useful to have your perspectives, both of you, but not only on what's going on, but on what the source of al-Shabaab's appeal is and its staying power. So perhaps AMISOM and the UN can thwart some of al-Shabaab's violent actions and operations, but it seems to me it's much more complex to change people's ideas and thinking. So with those remarks, I want to turn the floor over first to Special Representative Kay and then to Ambassador Sidiku, and then we're going to have a Q&A and a discussion, and we're going to end promptly at 1:30, and I hope all of you, out of courtesy to our guests, will stay throughout and not kind of wander off. So let me first invite you to take the floor. Thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador Hirsch, and thank you for the warm welcome. And yes, I confess I'm a repeat offender, recidivist, that I've been here, as you say, 3 times, maybe not in the last year, but it's 18 months probably.
Yeah, something like that.
And I'm very grateful to IPI for continuing to host me and feed me sandwiches when I need them. But more than that, I'm grateful for people continuing to come. I think, as I said in February, which was the second time I came, I was interested to see how big the audience was, because the first time I came, we had a good-sized audience. Because part of our jobs, both Mammon and my job, is obviously to try and keep Somalia up on the international agenda and keep the interest levels high. So it's always, it's a pleasure for us to have the opportunity to discuss and hear from you and share with you our views. In terms of being rude and leaving, I expect those who want to leave most are probably still standing at the back. But there are 5 at least or 6 seats down here in the front. If anybody wants to sit in the front row, please don't be shy.
Yeah, just come on up there. We've got a number of seats here.
Yeah. First, let me also apologize for that video, which I don't know, I found it probably as embarrassing as you did to watch. I found it as embarrassing to watch myself on screen. But it was done very quickly as the second anniversary of UNSOM, and it was, as you could see, an attempt to try and capture a little bit the positive narrative that I do deeply believe is correct for Somalia. Why, and I should also confess that you saw me scoring a goal. That was the second time I tried. The first time I think it was about sort of 10 yards wide of the goal. So it was a take 2, and I managed to get it on target. So, right. Why we are here, I mean, Mammon and I have been here yesterday to engage with the Security Council in informal interactive dialogue on Somalia, particularly in the context of a joint African Union, United Nations review that's been done recently of the AMISOM military operation and activity in Somalia. So that was a good session yesterday, 2.5 hours with the Security Council, and I know that Mammon will speak a bit to that subject in his remarks. Let me do what you invited me to do, which is just talk a little bit about an update on the political progress in the country. For any of you who were here in February, you might remember I got a little bit carried away with a sort of metaphor of, we're state building, and that was actually a process of really building a house. And when you build a house, you have to do it in a certain sequence. For example, you can't start with the roof. You actually have to start building the foundations, and then the walls, and then the roof on top of that. And if you recall, I was saying that is the 3 stages that Somalis have set themselves. The foundations of the new Somalia are the federal member states, the emerging federal member states, and getting a federal Somalia in place. The walls that go on top of that then are the Constitution and the Constitutional Review to write a new federal constitution. And then the roof was the democratization and the elections. And that at that stage I said, we don't need to worry about whether the roof is going to be tin or straw or wood or anything like that. Our task at the moment is finishing the foundations and getting the walls done. So what are we now? 5 months later, I've come to give you an update on the house building project. Any of you who've been involved in having work done on your houses or building a house yourself, etc., probably has had the same experience, that everything takes longer and costs more than you originally thought. And I think I'd probably be true to say that this project is a bit behind schedule. But I will describe a little bit where we've got to, but also explain why that fundamentally is not a problem. The foundations we're still working on. The foundations are the formation of the interim regional administrations, which will become federal member states. The leap forward or the step forward that has happened since February as the beginning of a nearly now the completion of a process in the central regions, the conference happening in Adado to form a new interim regional administration based on Gal Gadoud and southern Mudug. That process is, I'm reasonably confident, something that could be completed, if not before Ramadan, then during Ramadan. And then that will join the other foundation stones that are there, the Juba interim administration, the interim Southwest administration, Puntland that's been there for a while, and now central regions. There is a beginning of a process and discussion around the final building block, which would be a interim regional administration in Hiran and Middle Shebeli. That will take a little bit longer to come, but I am pretty hopeful, and that, well, we've set an ambitious sort of target for that. President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud and myself have asked partners who are working through the New Deal Compact to try to complete that work by the end of July. We'll see whether it's possible or not. The walls, the constitutional review, is a process which has sort of moved more slowly than we wanted, more slowly than the Somalis wanted. The Interim Constitutional Review and Implementation Commission, what a long word, ICRIC, has been established for a year but hasn't made a lot of progress. They had a setback a month or so ago. The chair of it resigned. They've now just appointed a new chair, and we're optimistic that they will get to work along with the Parliamentary Oversight Committee on the constitutional review quite soon. The Constitution review, I think, is now envisaged probably as a two-stage process. The first stage being a review of those aspects, largely technical, that need to be reviewed ahead of the end of this term of office in 2016. And beyond 2016, a completion of the constitutional review, addressing those elements which are a little bit more fundamental and difficult in terms of federalism, for example, some of the details on resource sharing between what will become federal member states. And then we come to the roof, the elections, and again, progress has not been as fast as was anticipated and hoped. The National Independent Electoral Commission, the Somali body which should run and organize the elections, has not yet been formed. Eventually now there are the names, proposed names of the commissioners before Parliament for approval. And again, I'm hoping that that commission will be, the commissioners will be approved and the commission will start work in the coming weeks. However, realistically, this is now the end of the mandate of this Parliament is the 20th of August 2016. So little over 12 months from the time the National Independent Electoral Commission will be formed. And I am told by those far more expert in elections than I am that that is almost an impossible period, short period, for all the necessary work to be done in terms of, for example, voter registration and training and setting up of a robust elections administration system. I don't want to preempt, and nobody wants to preempt, the federal government doesn't want to preempt what the view of the National Independent Electoral Commission will be. So it's too soon to say categorically that in August 2016 it will not be possible to have one person, one vote elections. That is not a statement we can make categorically at this stage. But I think it's wise for us to factor in that the nature of the electoral process in August 2016 may not be one person, one vote. And again, the President and myself, we co-chair what is called the High-Level Partnership Forum, which is the sort of top guiding body, Politburo, no, the guiding body for the Somali New Deal Compact, which brings together the partnership of the international community with the federal government. And we shall have a meeting of that in the end of July to follow up from the Copenhagen conference, which was at the end of 2014. And the President and I have asked that at that high-level partnership forum, the meeting discusses and agrees an action plan which will be leading to a decision on what kind of election modalities will happen in 2016. And that is an action plan for essentially a consultative process, a national dialogue, if you like, between all stakeholders, not just in the center, but in the regions as well, so that everybody's voice can be heard and the final decision on what kind of electoral process it is will hopefully be one which is based on a national consensus and finally approved by the Somali Parliament. And also at the High-Level Partnership Forum in July, we have proposed that the meeting should discuss and agree a set of guiding principles, if you like, for that electoral process. What are the criteria which would make it a good process, a better process than in 2012? So that's the state of play on that. If you go back to the house analogy, I think I'm pretty confident we're going to have some firm and foundations built. And let's face it, I mean, you know, that is fundamental, that is important. I mean, we've got to get the foundations right, strong and proper, and if it takes a bit longer to get the federal member states formed in a durable and stable way, then so be it. That will form the basis of the new Somalia, so it needs to be given time. We will have firm foundations by August of 2016. And the walls will be, if you like, half finished to be completed after 2016. And the roof will be a temporary roof. And I don't think any of that is an absolute disaster at all. I mean, this is a country who's had, as you say, 25 years of chaos, civil war, state failure, absence of government and governance. Nobody expected it to be quick or easy to rebuild that Somali house. So I think if we do it in sensible, pragmatic stages, and there is a strong commitment in 2016 to whatever happens, a transfer of public office, a new parliament, which will elect a president, no extension, but through a process which is the best possible that we can achieve then. And if all of that happens peacefully and relatively smoothly, then I think that would count as a success. So that's it. That's where your house has got to. In the questions and answers, I mean, I'm sure we'll cover a lot of things. I don't want to take too much time now, but I'd be very happy to discuss a little bit any of the security sort of issues, how safe it is or not for us to work there, humanitarian issues, the regional issues, Yemen and the impact of that, and also to reflect with you later on why, if my hypothesis that this is an emerging success story is true, what are the ingredients that go to make it so. Anyway, I will finish there and look forward to hearing what my dear friend Maman will have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much. So let me just turn the floor over to you, Ambassador Siddiqui. Please.
Thank you, Hirsch. Thank you for IPI for having me here. I dodged you guys 2 years ago when I was in Washington, D.C. Supposed to come here and talk about the Sahel. I managed not to come, but this time around, I'm here.
Thank you, finally.
Somalia deserve that. It's really about the Somali people. So Nick and I have been around. We work very closely together to make sure that Somalia remains a success story it is, and show also model of collaboration and partnership between UN and AU. I was UN before with my family, UNICEF. I left, I'm back here at AU, but with same family. Let me say this. About 9 months ago, I left Washington, D.C., where I was ambassador of my country, Niger Republic, and accepted to be head of AMISOM. Of course, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it's good in a sense that I didn't have any culture shock. I'm a nomad from the Sahel, so I just joined my brothers and sisters, nomad from the other side of the continent. But I was pleasantly surprised, and by the resilience of the people. We all know about that, but also by their hunger for life, despite the culture of hatred that Al-Shabaab and others are trying to plant there. So in that sense, personally, to me, it's a blessing that I've been there to get into this new experience. Let me say this, what I said yesterday to Security Council, but it was informal interaction, so many of the things we discussed about are under what some people would call the Chatham rules, so I won't be repeating them here. But I said that we are at a crossroads in Somalia. When I say we, the international community, including UN, Africans, the African Commission, Somalis, and the friends of Somalia, because Somalia has friends all over. Resources are getting scarcer in the world, so sometimes we tend to believe that we have to limit investment. And I was saying, if we do that for Somalia, then we're bound to repeat mistakes made elsewhere, and we all come to regret it. And I said, Somalia is not Yemen, Somalia is not Iraq, Somalia is not Libya, Somalia is not Syria. Somalia is a country that is coming out of a terrible crisis that has been going for now 25 years, but with people who believe it's happening and hope it's there. And we have no right to go back on precisely helping to create the conditions for us to ensure that what's happening up there doesn't come down through Somalia all the way to the rest of Africa, because that would be the disaster. And that's what we have all been working to precisely avoid. And I think we should keep the work going so that the enemies of peace and freedom don't take yet another big chunk of areas that would endanger liberty all over. I personally, in 9 months, have seen progress in all fronts. The military, yes, there are challenges, but between 60 and 80% of the country definitely free from Al-Shabaab. Some people will say just the cities. I would say even more, because peace is also in our minds. And when you see Somali people not afraid of talking against Al-Shabaab, you know there is a change. On the political front, Nick, who knows very well about it, has mentioned to you what's being done to make sure that we work towards 2016 on a concerted mode. So in a sense, again, really now is not the time to be off guard. We need to finish the job of destroying the capacities of Al-Shabaab. And this is why AMISOM is there supporting the National Somali Army and security forces. We need to do that. We need to be enhancing and developing the Somali National Security Forces capability. Because make no mistake, Somalis will take care of that. No matter how long we stay there supporting, we must have a Somali army and police also to safeguard the country. That's the only way to set the security condition for stabilization in order to extend the government's authority, and I would say legitimacy, throughout the country. So as Nick said, we just completed a benchmarking exercise to look into whether we can have a UN mission instead of peace enforcement mission that AMISOM have been conducting so far. And it was concluded that we will need to continue the way we're working until the end of 2016. And for the next 18 months, the security strategy should be one enabling the political process at varying speeds, of course, at national, regional, and district levels. But we need, as AMISOM and Somali National Army, to restart major offensives against Al-Shabaab in the remaining areas, essentially the Juba corridor, so the Juba Valley, and also somehow in the mountains of Puntland and where they're hiding. We have to ensure again that the Somali National Army and AMISOM operations go hand in hand, which we've been doing together. They have their own constraints, and when Resolution 2124 was adopted to enable us to go, I think we somehow thought that Somali National Army would come on board very quickly, which is not the case. So many of us, various partners, are training. We may need more coordination in that area. We may talk about it during the Q&A. So my take, if I may here, and then we can come back to some of the issues I'm talking about. My other take that I wanted to discuss about here is that everybody sees Al-Shabaab as purely a Somali phenomenon now. I am of those who think that while let's say the geographic center of gravity of Al-Shabaab is still Somalia, I believe it's the nature of organization to be now shifting and become more of a transnational organization. And this is what we're seeing in Kenya with the Garissa tragedy. Before that, we had the Westgate Mall attack. We had attacks in 2010 in Kampala, and so on. And we also see these days that some of Al-Shabaabs that we talk about in Kenya or even in Somalia, they speak Swahili. Yes, Swahili is a language we tend to speak in the region, but normally one would think they'd be speaking Somali or perhaps Arab for Al-Qaeda members who are with them. So this tells us there is a need for a concerted regional and international action to curb this new development before junction is made with Yemen, yes, but the Middle East at large on an articulated mode. This would require intelligence work together. This would require coordination also in combat. Huge coordination. If we made a mistake of going our own ways, each will come to regret it in the region. We can further discuss about this if you want. So we need to turn what we see now is the decentralized nature of Al-Shabaab in rural areas or putting bombs here and there in Mogadishu to perhaps further help fragment them and somehow manage to disrupt their control and command. And so that we can hopefully also push them to more internal divisions, because there are divisions within Al-Shabaab. In a way that will facilitate the work of government also, because government is working and extending hands to a youth that for lack of hope or perhaps lack of opportunities have joined Al-Shabaab, and perhaps others as well, except of course the core Al-Qaeda elements of Al-Shabaab. So again, this is about Somalia and the Somali people. So when I go, everywhere I go, people ask me questions. I always say, ask also about the perceptions of the Somali people. How do they see this when they look a few months back? How do they see their lives changing? Are they seeing hope? I believe it's there. But the job needs to be completed. So I see us in this room all as advocates for more resources to fight al-Shabaab, but also for more resources to provide for the Somali people. We tend sometimes to believe it's all about guns. It's also, I believe, about providing the basic to the Somali people so they can believe again it's possible to have a different type of life. Good to liberate areas, but if there is no water, there is no sanitation, there is no health, there is no education for our children, something is not right. So let's also keep that in perspective. Let me stop at this by saying what the Prime Minister of Somalia was saying yesterday. We need to give hope to the youth of Somalia. What is out there as initiatives, programs to bring them on board and shift them away from the propaganda of Al-Shabaab? And I know Nick and others are working hard to facilitate reconciliation among Somalis. We have to find a way also to talk to our Somali brothers and sisters truth. You can't eternally keep being in clan warfare, because that's also another issue that doesn't help matters. But I guess it's a matter of evolution. But when people talk about fatigue, it also has to do with that. I tend, when I sit with my Somali brothers, to just talk like that, because that's how we talk when we follow our cows in my nomadic area, in my Sahel. And I believe that's what also they talk about when they are sitting together, even in the tents, maybe not tents in Somalia, not so much, but surely following the camels. I just put it, I wanted to use that allegory, or it was images, to just conclude on that one and open up for discussions.
Well, thank you both very, very much. And of course, you raised, both of you, a number of provocative, open-ended questions, including the nature of al-Shabaab and whether this is really Somali these days, or whether there are external forces involved, whether from Yemen or Kenya or elsewhere. And then you referred just now to clan warfare as a still unresolved issue. So I'd like to kind of, rather than ask you immediately my own questions, sort of open this up and see if we can't take 2 or 3 questions at once from the floor, having listened to both them, Mr. Kay and Ambassador Siddiqui. And then I'll chime in with my own. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and identify yourself when you get up. So Warren, and just give him the microphone. And if you look at everybody as well as the panel, they'll all be happy.
Warren Hogue of IPI. Something you haven't mentioned, but I wanted to ask you about. Somalis have a reputation for doing very well when they arrive in other countries. So I want to ask you about the diaspora and whether any of them are returning, whether there is an active effort to get them to come back now that you have a process of reconstitution of the state underway.
That's great. As a matter of fact, that video showed people getting off the airplane. So are those people actually coming back, or are those just people who've been away for a few days and took a break in Kenya? What's going on here? So, or the Arabian Peninsula, or wherever. So any other comment here from the floor? This is, you know, you're all working on these issues, and this is our opportunity to learn some more about all of this. So
It's not like an IPI audience, to be shy.
My word.
Or short in questions.
So let's go here in the back, the gentleman in the back, and then Michael over there. Just identify yourself and your organization.
Thank you.
You got to.
Hello? Okay, thanks. So I'm Fabrice from the Center on International Cooperation. My question is on the different security arrangements security reform from the UN and also from outside actors on the counter-piracy. Do you see these as contributing to peace building broadly in Somalia? Thank you.
Michael, in the back there. There's another colleague of mine.
Hi, Michael Snyder with IPI. I was hoping you could tell me a bit more about the humanitarian situation, and particularly the security humanitarian nexus, and what the implications for the refugee crisis is as AMISOM continues and the UN continue to expand and create more secure and stable conditions in the country. Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, so it's really the same question. What about Yemen? So we have this remarkable event, apparently, that refugees are entering Somalia from Yemen. It used to be that Somalis went as refugees to Ethiopia or Kenya or somewhere else, and suddenly we have Somalia being a haven, at least a temporary haven for Yemenis. And is the Yemeni revolution, or whatever you call it, having a security impact in Somalia? Or are there Yemeni rebels or others adding to your security problem? So let's take those. You want to start?
Yeah, I'll happily start, and I'm sure Mammon will complete. And Warren, on the diaspora, yes, I mean, diaspora is very important. Yes, diaspora are returning. They've been returning really steadily, I would think, since at least 2010, 11, around that time. The diaspora are important, both they're bringing skills, which are well needed. The IOM has a program that they run for diaspora to place them in government institutions and ministries. They've got more than 300 people placed there. These are professionals who've come back to contribute. There is more demand for that program from the diaspora than there is funding for supporting it, but it's a useful thing. Otherwise, I mean, diaspora on the private sector is very important. I mean, a lot of the development, we didn't really showcase it so much in the video, but you can see in Mogadishu the buildings that are going up, whether they're hotels or Hormuz Telecom Tower. There's a lot of diaspora business investment, which is very important and particularly strong from the Gulf, where there's a lot of successful Somali businessmen based in Dubai. That's a good thing. It's an engine for the economy. It'll be an even better thing when, of course, they start to contribute more actively to revenue and taxation in Somalia as well, and the money and the profits stay within Somalia. The remittances from the diaspora, again, nobody's asked yet. I'm quite surprised. In a US audience, it's often an issue. The lifeline that the remittances provide from the diaspora, at least $1.2 billion a year of remittances, is vital. And there's certainly within Mogadishu evidence that 1 in 5 households depend on remittances for their survival. It is therefore a matter of concern, and the UN has raised its voice on a number of occasions, that if those remittances were to stop overnight because of actions taken by commercial banks or institutions, then that would have a disastrous impact, a humanitarian impact. So we've been advocating for alternative methods to be found. Recently, slightly linked to that, the MasterCard has started an arrangement with a Somali bank, Premier Bank, free advertising for Premier Bank and MasterCard. But it's an important development, which now means that it opens up a much more properly controlled and internationally recognized way of doing financial transactions with Somalia. So yeah, the diaspora is vital, and those people you saw getting off the plane, I don't know who they were actually, but I assume they might have been examples of returning people. It links to the humanitarian question as well about refugees and things, and your question on Yemen. On Yemen, Yes, it is, because of the instability and tragedy that's happening in Yemen now. In the last 2 months, Somalia has received 12,400 returning from Yemen. And I say returning because over 11,000 of those are Somalis who have been living in Yemen either as refugees or otherwise and are now returning to Somalia. A small number, therefore, are Yemeni nationals and third country nationals as well. But yes, it's remarkable, if you like. I mean, a country that people used to flee from in their millions, i.e. Somalia, is now considered safe by some to return to. The humanitarian side of that is being dealt with, I think, reasonably well by the local authorities and IOM and UNHCR together. The numbers are going up all the time. For planning purposes, I think UNHCR, at least looking at the next couple of months, 50,000 people expected, with an outside figure of 100,000 for planning purposes, but nobody knows exactly. The security impact of Yemen as well is of concern. The federal government and the government in Puntland and in Somaliland have all expressed their concern that there could be a risk of both terrorists, personnel, individuals entering Somalia in amongst the returning refugees, and security screening by the host authorities is happening, but may not be 100%. And there is also, a worry that just the sheer instability in Yemen, the large number of weapons in circulation there, the lack of any kind of controls, the fact that the Gulf of Aden is a relatively narrow stretch of water, and that Puntland and Somaliland are the nearest landfall, mean that there could be an outflow. A lot of this is speculative. Nobody really knows and sees the evidence of it yet. But I think if the federal government and the local authorities are expressing their concerns, we should listen to them and take them seriously. Otherwise, on the humanitarian, I'll leave maybe Maman to talk about the security that Fabrice asked. On the humanitarian situation, yeah, I mean, if you were one of the 1.1 million IDPs living in Somalia, and you heard the UN SRSG going on about, what a wonderful place Somalia is, how it's getting better and better, and everything's, wonderful and rosy, you'd have a sense of humor failure. And I think if they saw that video as well, they, would, just sort of question whether they were living on the same planet. So there is an ongoing reality. I mean, there is an ongoing serious humanitarian challenge in Somalia that has been there for years and is not showing dramatic signs of improvement. The funding situation for that suffers enormously from competing global crises, so that this year's humanitarian appeal for just over $800 million is so far only 24% funded. And it is urgent that partners come up with funding for that, because these are life-supporting operations. 3 million people need either livelihood assistance or food assistance every day, and at the moment the UN does not have the funding to cover all those needs. So that is a reality in this sort of, and it's ongoing chronic problem. Is there any improvements at all? I would say yes, there is, and it can be measured by, to some extent, the spontaneous returns that are beginning to happen from refugees, particularly out of Kenya. And there is also a voluntary assisted return program for refugees coming from Kenya as well. And so there are certain areas, 3 pilot areas that UNHCR is working on at the moment, about to be expanded to 9 areas in Somalia, where with the right support and the right assistance, refugees are coming back voluntarily. Otherwise, the climatic conditions, a bit like New York, in Somalia it's raining, and unlike in New York, that's a good thing. So this year's rains in Somalia are so far quite good in this rainy season that started about a month ago. And although it causes in some places flooding, which is unfortunate, overall the risk of drought is at the current level relatively low. So you know, it's a mixed picture, but I don't think we should underestimate the fact that the happy picture of a country coming together, becoming more better governed, more prosperity is definitely a truth and a reality, but it isn't the truth and reality that every Somali is experiencing directly.
So the video is just part of the story, obviously. So your remarks also remind me of the prevailing topic of conversation when I was in Somalia in the 80s was the rains for the following year. That's what everybody worried about or talked about, as well as whether Ethiopia would block the rivers, close the rivers. For its own use. These were huge concerns. So, Ambassador Siddiqui.
Thank you so much. Talk about rain. I come from an area where rain is weighted as, what it is, a blessing. If I tie it to security and the road conditions, I would say not always. If I want the troops of AMISOM to move against Al-Shabaab, we also have to look into whether rain allows that or not. Similarly, when we are to support either refugees or just communities with food, with medicine, etc., we do have constraints because the roads in Somalia, of course, nobody has worked on the road for so many years. And the condition of roads are terrible. And when it rains, sometimes we just don't have roads. So, for example, for the UN and AMISOM, we use air transport a great deal, and that costs a lot of money. Why we plead and we request understanding for resources at least to be kept at the level they are instead of being reduced. Somebody asked a question about security arrangement and contribution to peace building. This is one of the missions of AMISOM, to secure areas so that you can have reconciliation process towards state formation, so that you can have clan parleys, if I may say, so that people can sit and just discuss and take the time to discuss and find solutions to their differences. And that's what's happening now in central Somalia, and that's what happened before in southwest Somalia. We have a state, as you know, interim state in Juba as well. So this is what we do. We provide the space free of gun for people to sit and talk about their issues. On the Yemen issue, earlier I mentioned that we have to make sure that the region share information, that the countries share information among themselves. From Middle East, of course, but more importantly also down south, so that we know who is who's coming. In a sense, I rejoice that Somalis are coming back home because it tells me that we're doing a good job. That there is more security there than there is elsewhere. Now, whether people coming from Yemen are Al-Qaeda or ISIL or just name them, well, we don't have any proof yet. We can suspect that you may always have somebody trying to sneak in. But for now, they're essentially refugees, fleeing for their lives and going to more secure areas, coming back home also. Let me say a word about diaspora. Nick mentioned how effectively they contribute to the construction of a country. When I go to Villa Somalia or I go to Mogadishu town in my APC, armored vehicle, I can see the life out there. And in a sense, I envy that life, that we have a stringent security protocol that wouldn't let us go and mingle. But people sitting at the cafes, the cranes that you see all over the town, to me, that can only be diaspora investment. Because the money, I don't see where it can come from within. I mean, I may be wrong, because I'm just 9 months old there. Also, government has taken it itself to organize, we have a full office in charge of diaspora, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that is taking initiatives to, that in French, encadrer, to really provide a framework for the diaspora to more meaningfully contribute to the development of a country. Recently, 3 months ago, James, we were in Rwanda with worldwide diaspora, Somali diaspora, to discuss issues, for them to see also how that functions in a place that is functional, that is in a place that works, Rwanda in that case, and to share experiences, to make sure that women in diaspora see their sisters of Rwanda, where we don't need to say anything about that. We all know what Rwanda is doing for women. And it was interesting to witness that interaction and see that they are so much eager to learn and go back home and share that experience with the women of Rwanda, of Somalia, and the diaspora of Somalia in general. And this is organized by the government through us, which also a sign of people organizing themselves better. So I tend to believe, and I'm sure if there are Somalis in this room, most of them are diaspora Somalis. Prime Minister yesterday that you saw is pretty much a diaspora product from Canada, I believe, and contributing, accepting to go back home and taking the risk we're all taking. So in that sense, we are in good shape, if I may say. The humanitarian situation, again, let me go back to the roads. Yes, we have liberated areas, but we do have problem controlling all of us. You may think 22,000 troops or many people, but when you look at the challenges of a country, the roads, but also the size of it, and also the fact that you have to hold ground when you take a city, let's say Kismayo, or let's say Barawe, or let's say Baidoa, you liberate those areas, you don't leave them because the following day they're back. So it's a matter of holding ground, securing the main supply routes, providing escort to humanitarian groups, sometimes helping to secure ministries, etc. It's quite a challenge. So when you mention challenge for AMISOM, these are the challenges for AMISOM. Not so much confronting Al-Shabaab because they don't stop and fight. They run. They try to mesh into the population. Something I didn't say about diaspora is also the work that the diaspora does on the ideological front. We're in contact with committed religious leaders from the diaspora. Because what happens when you liberate an area? Yes, you take an area, but you don't know who Al-Shabaab leaves behind to continue indoctrinating the youth of the populations. That also has to be taken care of. And diaspora is not only committed and ready to work with us on that, but we're getting pretty much good teaching from them in that respect. I will stop there. Thank you.
So let's take one more round here. There's a yes, Craig. Why don't you, the one there, then over there, and the two over here. So if you could identify yourselves, please.
Sure.
Short questions.
Craig Charney of Charney Research and IPI. Mr. Kay, you said that an election is unlikely in August 2016. What are the likely alternative dates, and what are the factors that influence that in Somali circumstances? And what is happening in terms of preparations for voter education or other aspects of electoral activity, if anything?
Yeah, you actually implied, as I heard it, that it might not be an election on a one-man, one-vote basis, that it might be some other basis. So maybe in answering Craig's question, you could sort of comment on that. Please, go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bastian. I was with UNICEF Somalia, now with DPKO. SRSG, maybe you could say a few words about Somaliland, where the discussions, the political dialogue currently stands, and where they fall with the question of 2016 and the elections. Thank you.
Terrific. And then there were two over here, the lady in the third row, and then I can't see, the gentleman in the fifth row, both on this side over here. And yourself first. Go ahead. Can you?
Hello, my name is Saber. I'm from the Center on International Cooperation at New York University. My question was regarding the commissions, whether it's the Election Commission or the Constitutional Review Commission, how transparent it is and how inclusive it is. Because, for instance, in Afghanistan, we had the same excitement in the beginning about how things were going in the right direction, but all of a sudden things went in the wrong direction. Thank you.
Great. So the lady here in the third row, and then the gentleman. Why don't you let her? Hello there. Let her ask her question first. Go ahead, miss. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hello, I'm Natalie Benkers from the German mission to the UN. Mr. Sidiku, in your opening remarks, you stressed the importance of youth and education in Somalia to draw them away from the threat of Al-Shabaab. So I would like to know more about what current programs you have in this respect and current actions plans, if they exist. Thank you.
Too. And then finally, the gentleman there who has kindly passed the microphone to our colleague from Germany.
Nino Sergi, an Italian NGO, SOS, working in Somalia. Three questions. Shabab are not the same in the different regions of Somalia. The ambassador said, told us also of divisions. Example, in Johar, they were not.
Be short, please. Not three questions.
In Johar, they were not so terrible than other provinces. In your work, you consider this division, these differences. Second, how much civil society is growing and is pressing parliament and government? And the third, what about corruption in the government and other institutions? Thank you.
Very good. So you can compress your answers, if you will.
Yeah.
If you feel like it.
We'll try and compress our answers as much as possible. Yes, on the elections, Craig's question, I mean, let me be quite clear. There is a very firm commitment from the President, from the Prime Minister and the Speaker that there will be no extension beyond what is forecast in the Constitution as the end of this mandate and term. So Parliament 20th of August 2016 and September 2016 for the President. So the question is, what kind of process will determine that transfer of public office? And yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, I was very careful to say that we can't prejudge or preempt what the Independent Electoral Commission will decide when it's formed, but we can also be sort of pragmatic and realistic and say that it's time to start considering what could be a different process. And that has to be a Somali decision, it has to be a Somali-led process to reach that decision. And the overall aspiration, the President has been very, very clear publicly, is that it will be a different and more representative, more inclusive process than in 2012. So that's, and how that will happen is, as I say, to be debated and to be discussed by Somalis more than anything. Somaliland, the political dialogue, I assume you're talking about between Somaliland and authorities in Mogadishu. It isn't at the moment going anywhere. The last round of talks broke up in Turkey without the two sides meeting, and I haven't seen a date set for any further resumption of that. Obviously, we're keen to encourage a process, but this is a process that the government of Turkey has been hosting and organizing, and I'm not aware of any new dates for that, but I'm sure it could come about. The commissions, how transparent and inclusive are they? I think getting better. The selection sort of process for the latest commissions, the Independent Electoral Commission, Boundaries Federation Commission, there's been a quite transparent, quite well managed process for getting from sort of large field, it was publicly advertised, lots of applications, and then it was whittled down to shortlist of 200, and then down to 27, and then down to 9. And Parliament will scrutinise those 9. So you know, it's not a bad system in terms of inclusivity. There is law in the laws establishing those commissions. There is a reference to the need for gender balance, and all of the commissions do have at least one, in some cases 2 women out of the 9 commissioners. Not great, but it's a step in the right direction, with at least a couple of the commissions being chaired by women as well. Inclusive, they are inclusive on a clan basis because, funnily enough, 9, if you do maths, the clan formula that works in Somalia is 4.5, and you double that, you get 9, and that's, strangely enough, the number of the commissioners on these things. So it is inclusive on a clan basis. Your comment about Afghanistan, we were all excited about that, is well taken indeed. And I've worked in Afghanistan as well as other fragile, conflict-affected states. So I have also lived through periods of, excitement, enthusiasm, and optimism, and then seen those hopes a bit dashed. Maybe I'm just an incurable optimist or whatever, but I think there is a very compelling case for why in Somalia that really is not going to be the case. But too short a time to go into that now. Youth education in Somalia, Mammon is talking quite a lot on that, which is good, but we're totally of one mind on that, and I think both of us are definitely of one mind that as we go forward to 2016, beyond 2016, increasingly, I think both of us are concerned that we have a pretty good plan on the political side. Not we, I mean there is, in particular a Somali-owned and led political plan. There is a pretty good plan on the security side as well for countering al-Shabaab, for building up Somali security forces. On both those tracks, there is clear progress, not runaway success, but clear progress. There is a plan and there is progress. On the third leg, economic recovery, which will provide the jobs and the sort of economic circumstances for sustainable peace and security, I'm less convinced that there is a plan and significant progress. And I think that will become more and more in focus as we go on. As security conditions and political conditions allow, the international community will have to lean in much harder to the economic reconstruction and recovery in Somalia, including basic things such as infrastructure, as you say, for the roads. Italian NGO colleague who obviously knows, I'm sure, Somalia and Somalis far better than I do. Shabaab not the same everywhere. I'm sure that's absolutely right, and one can already see divisions within al-Shabaab which are leading to a certain number of defections as well, and inter-Nissan strife within their leadership. And all of that, I think, is a good thing. The government is pursuing an amnesty program, offering amnesty to those who wish to renounce violence, join a political process, and are not within the sort of very top echelons of those wanted for crimes against humanity. Civil society, is it growing? Yes, it's growing. Is it, in any way as strongly rooted as we would like to see it? No, but it is a recognized sort of entity, and it is important, for example, in the political processes underway, whether it's the state formation, constitutional review, or eventually an electoral process in 2016, that civil society has a stronger voice and stronger presence than it did in 2012. That, in short form, is to say, in 2012, 185 traditional titled elders selected the parliament. And they did a good job on the merits of the case at the time. But in 2016, it will not be sustainable that just a group of titled traditional elders do that. There will have to be more voices heard in that selection process, civil society being one of those voices. Corruption getting better. Corruption getting better. Oh, sorry.
Less corruption. Maybe.
There is some serious work underway, serious progress to some extent being made by the Financial Governance Committee, which involves the World Bank and donors working with the federal government to try and put in place improved institutions, improved scrutiny. There's a lot more transparency than there used to be. Major public contracts are all now submitted to the Financial Governance Committee for review. And There is far more transparency in terms of the asset recovery program that caused some concerns before. So I would say it's, from a low base, it's improving.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me have an even more compressed response to a couple of questions or issues raised here. Youth and education. And I'm really glad that that question came from a German corporation. I worked with a German corporation when I was working on Iraq, precisely to work on vocational education, for which our country has expertise, we all know, and sometimes also resources. So don't be surprised if Nick and I come and knock on your doors to support precisely that, because we don't have programs as elaborate as we wish to wean out the youth from not only Al-Shabaab, but to just give them perspective and show them that there's something else to do with one's life than following those folks. As UN and AU are working towards having more regional presence, I think this is an area that we should be exploring more, and we support with partners like yourselves. We are doing a few things with support from actually Germany, Italy, the Islamic Conference, and UK on quick impact projects in liberated areas, where of course you have youth also involved in reconstruction. But that's early recovery. We need something more methodologically organized and program for the youth. On civil society, I would like to touch on one issue that is close to my heart and to AMISOM's concerns. It's sexual exploitation and abuse. As you know, following a report by Human Rights Watch, the chairperson of the AU Commission commissioned an investigation, independent one, that came up with result showing 2 cases of verified cases of rape. And believe me, civil society has been very, very active in that front, to the extent that now we work with them to put in place extra measures to combat that scourge through a hotline that they manage so that victims can go to them, through further education of the public and also of troops, not only AMISOM, but also Somali security forces, and also through even a whistleblower system, so that we prevent, because we have to look at the bigger picture in this issue. It's not just you have cases, fine, but what are we doing to prevent those cases? What kind of education, because that's all it's all about also, and what kind of follow-up to end impunity, including compensation of victims or survivors. So in that front, we're working. We have standing MOUs with a number of NGOs who we're working. So at least for me, that's the experience I know more about. But it's booming, and I know we have to expect more of them on board with elections coming now. Thank you.
Well, this has been a very valuable hour and a quarter, and you can see that just about everybody's in the room still who was here at 12:15, which is a tribute to both of you, gentlemen, as well as to the interest in the issues. So you've both given us some warnings in the Afghanistan example, not to get swept away with excessive optimism. This is a long-term challenge, but the good news here is that we have the government of Somalia, we have the diaspora, we have the United Nations, and we have the African Union. So there's at least a quadrilateral engagement here that's going forward. IPI may be a 5th window on this, because we'd be really delighted to have you both back here to share more of your insights. So, and we all obviously would like to see Somalia itself become a true success story in Africa. So thank you both very, very much. Let's give them a big hand here.